discussed in class that the cell membrane is selectively permeable. That means only select things or molecules can move in and out of a cell, and it does it by two processes: through either passive transport or active transport. Passive transport requires no energy because it's moving from areas of high concentration with lots of particles to areas of low concentration with very few particles. That requires no energy. Versus active transport requires energy. Energy in the form of ATP, which happens to be made in the mitochondria. It requires energy because a particle or molecule is moving from an area of low concentration into an area of high concentration. Passive transport can be classified into a few different things. You can have diffusion, osmosis, or facilitated diffusion. Diffusion is just molecules moving from areas of high concentration to low concentration. And it can be any molecules. Areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. Requires no energy. Osmosis is very specifically just the diffusion of water. Does it require energy? No, it is a type of diffusion. So osmosis is just the diffusion of water. Facilitated diffusion is a little different. Facilitated diffusion is still particles moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. But the particles are too big. They can't fit through the cell membrane easily. So they have to be helped by, or the process has to be facilitated by, protein channels. So facilitated diffusion is when protein channels are used for diffusion of large molecules. They can't squeeze through the phospholipid bilayer, so they have to use the protein channels. An example of this is glucose. This is a phospholipid bilayer. This is a protein channel. Glucose is too big. It cannot fit through the phospholipid bilayer, so it has to move into the cell through a protein channel. It's facilitated. It's still moving from areas of high concentration to low concentration, So still requires no energy. But it just needs a tunnel because it's too big. I'm going to use this drawing to classify all three types or all three words related to diffusion. These we know as the phospholipids. This we know as the protein channel. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is small molecules. When you have small molecules diffusing from an area where there's a lot of them to just a little, that is simple diffusion, requiring no energy. They squeeze through the phospholipid bilayer. That's diffusion. Now, we're going to talk about osmosis. Osmosis is very specific. It's when water moves in or out of the cell. Still moving from areas of high to low concentration, so it requires no energy. That's osmosis. Water moving from areas of high concentration to low concentration. Osmosis. Now, we have molecules, such as glucose, that still need to move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. But they are too big. They can't squeeze through the phospholipid bilayer. So they have to move through the protein channel. And because proteins help them or facilitate the movement, this is called facilitated diffusion. We're going to learn a little more about osmosis. Which is the movement of water through a cell. There are three words in osmosis. There's something called isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic. In an isotonic solution, you have an equal amount of water inside and outside the cell. Equal amounts of water. Or equal amounts of concentration of water. This one is at equilibrium. It is happy. Hypertonic means there is very little water in the outside of the cell compared to the cell. There are lots of particles in the solution. But very little water. So the water will flow out. The cell will shrivel.
So, we are going to do glucose.
Water moves out. Hypotonic means you have a cell in solution.
Glucose.
Here you have a few particles in the cell.
Milk.
Excuse me, a lot of particles in the cell, very few in the solution. So there's lots of water in the solution. Now what happens is the cell fills up with water. the cell starts to swell. Water moves in. Water is moving back and forth to reach equilibrium. It's all about equilibrium.
Iodine, biuret, and benedicts. Glucose. Potato.
Getting things equal.
Egg. Milk.
If it's isotonic, things are already equal, so the cell is happy. If something is hypertonic, that means there's little water in the cell, but lots of particles around the outside. So what happens is the cell loses lots of water. If something's a hypotonic environment, that means there's few particles in the outside of the cell, lots of particles in the inside, so water has to move in. We will discuss this further in class. Osmosis is the diffusion of water. There are 3 types. The 3 situations are, the first, talked about, is isotonic. This is when a cell is in equilibrium. There's an equal number of particles of water inside and outside, so water is moving in, at the same time it's moving out. This cell is happy. Or you could have a hypotonic solution. A hypotonic solution, water is going to move into the cell. The cell is going to swell. That was supposed to be an S. The cell will swell up. This is because there's more water on the outside and less water on the inside. Hypertonic. When you have a hypertonic solution, the cell loses water and begins to shrivel. Water will move out of the cell because there's less water on the outside of the cell than the inside. The goal of diffusion, all types, is to reach equilibrium. The body wants to keep everything the same. Inside the cell, make it equal to whatever is outside the cell. When the cell reaches equilibrium, it's happy, and diffusion is over.